Obsessed. Transphobe. Homophobe.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and the rest of you. This is Jolly Scholar here with dispatch number 17, Jordan Peterson, Active Resistance to the World Economic Forum and Globalism. Jordan Peterson, he's hitting all the right buttons. Isn't it obvious? First, they drove him out of the universities. It just made him stronger. Then the government went after him. It's only made him stronger. Now, I'll admit, he got sick, he got weak, but he came back stronger. And now you've seen what's happened with his psychology license. It's a farce. But what is it? What is it really? It's their attempt to ritually humiliate him. It's Maoism. It's really also just fundamental Marxism, but perfected by Mao. They're trying to humiliate him. They're trying to get him to confess. They know he's not going to, but just the fact that they're trying to make him do it, and they can put that out in the public, is working to a certain degree with the people that already follow him. But for us, not at all. And I imagine he's still getting stronger and more people are paying attention to him. So this is really excellent. But here's what he's doing, and this is going to get so under their skin if it's successful. And I'm really hoping it will be. It's a first strike manifesto towards what he calls an alternative vision of the future. Now I'm going to show a few snippets, and make a few commentaries, because the video is fairly long. So I'm just going to cut out to some salient points and then go back and recapitulate. So here it is, Jordan Peterson's An Alternative Version of the Future. Okay, here we are. This is Jordan Peterson talking to Joe Rogan, and he's, I guess it's his grand announcement. He's introducing the fact that he is starting this organization, and it's a consortium, as he says, an invitation to the future is what he calls it. As you can see, I'm in my RV now because I'm moving, I'm buying property, buying stuff and selling, and anyways, I actually started this video a week ago. At any rate, so we're going to do this section now, and I'll go back to the pre-recorded part. I'm just going to do a few little cuts in here so you get the idea, because I really want to encourage you to go and listen to it. It's really excellent.
I set up an international consortium based in London. I can't tell you all the details yet, but we're trying to put together something like an alternative vision of the future, say an alternative to that kind of apocalyptic narrative that's being put forward, at least implicitly, by organizations like the WEF, and that's the virginal planet, rapacious tyrant, all-devouring consumer religion. And it's more like something like, well, we want to ask people 6 key.
Okay, so he goes on to say he wants to ask 6 key questions, but here he lays it out, right? He's saying in other organizations, that's true. Well, it really should say governments. But the World Economic Forum is the face of all this. This is where they collectively get together and actually slowly leak out to the public what they're doing. So Jordan from the academic world is taking the World Economic Forum head on, and this is excellent.
Key questions. Okay, so how do we get energy and resources at the lowest possible cost as rapidly as possible to the largest number of people around the world? That's one question. And so there's a presumption in the question, and here's one of the presumptions. You don't get to save the planet by making energy prices so expensive that no one poor can afford them. That's off the table. So if you want to develop alternative energy sources.
So what he's saying here is, and he goes on to talk about it a little bit more, but the basic idea is you basically rub the poor into the ground. And part of that is supposedly to also stop them from reproducing and whatnot. And he'll get onto that. But what he's not actually saying, and maybe this is not part of his thinking, they're going to rub what they call the third world, whoever that really is. But they're going to rub those people into the ground and then cause even more instability and even more mass immigration, which is the real objective of this climate change hoax.
But human-focused and not predicated on the idea that there are too many goddamn mouths on the planet to feed and that you're evil if you just think about having children. So then on the governance front, this is where it gets kind of more left-wing, I would say, is none of the people involved in this consortium so far are very thrilled with global corporate fascist government media and corporation collusion. You know, and we're seeing this at the high end. It's like a Tower of Babel, is that the powerful players in the world are increasingly collaborating to impose a top-down vision of the future on everyone.
Okay, so he knows that socialism is fascism, and the corporate collaboration with socialism, it's either the corporations take over socialism or socialism takes over the corporation. It doesn't really matter, right? And he knows this. But I like the way he's phrasing it, because we need to win over more people from the so-called liberal left, right? Because we're still operating in a democracy. We still have to vote. And so this is a really good idea of his.
What would you call it? The encouragement and the maintenance of long-term monogamous couples who are child-centered, and to make increasing the birth rate part of that policy.
You know, he's talking to Europeans and Americans. He's talking basically to the Indo-Europeans of Europe and America. Well said, because everybody else has the common sense to do this, right? I mean, it's not like you got to go tell the Africans to have more children, or indigenous people, or Chinese. Of course, the Chinese had to be, it's another story, right?
In the West, because we're very immature, we think that the purpose of a marriage is the happiness of the people who are involved in the marriage, the husband and the wife. And that's just not the purpose of marriage at all. The purpose is long-term facilitation of their psychological and spiritual development, and the establishment of an environment that's beneficial to children.
Now, this is really excellent, because he's saying something about marriage that is hardly ever brought up, especially in the Western tradition. Spiritual development is an important part, a central feature of the marriage. And if you look at marriage from the medieval ages forward, that was always the case. I mean, this is one of the reasons that the church promoted it in that way, and so did the Protestants. The husband and wife together in a family, child-centered, is also a spiritual discipline. So that's really well said.
The other question is, well, it's pretty clear that we have to live inside a story. And one story is power rules everything.
Now, I come from another position. We have to live within experience, especially experiences of the, we call it varieties of the ecstatic experience, because that will generate the right stories. But okay, I'm still with him here.
And one story is power rules everything. But that's not a very good story. It's a very pathological story. It's more like a confession, too, if that's the story you insist upon. It's like, so you think power governs everything, do you? Okay, I know what you're like.
Okay, so here he's also addressing something that I was looking at a long time when I was involved in the universities. When you take a leftist socialist, right? The left socialism versus the right socialism, national socialism. When you take the leftist socialist analysis of anything, it reduces humanity to a herd of animals. It analyzes everything from the point of view of power relationships, basically dominance and submission. And so it's really an anti-intellectual, even though these intellectuals with their convoluted rhetoric go on and on and on, and all these convoluted concepts that when you analyze say almost nothing. So these pseudo-intellects make it look like it's a very deeply intellectual argument. It's really a primitive argument. They're actually reducing all human behavior to the level of an animal. And he's going on to say, no, there's more. And one of them he goes on to say is free association, creativity, which is one of the things that I've been working on with my work with festival culture and the Rocio, is that I'm going to put forth the argument that social differentiation is in its easiest form, in its most natural form, is a result of creative pursuits, creativity and play. Don't want to press that now or prove it or anything. I'm just a little foreshadowing there. And this is basically what he's saying.
See, I believe the spirit of voluntary play governs everything, not the spirit of power. It's like voluntary association. That's what we're doing in this conversation. I just finished a seminar in Miami, and the first 8 parts of it were released on the Daily Wire 3 months ago, Exodus seminar. We walked through the story of Exodus. Exodus means ex hodos, means the way forward.
Okay, so here I'm going to leave it at this, all right? he spends a good deal of time talking about Exodus, and he does some really beautiful remarks. The fractionated individual, whatever you do not, whatever responsibilities you abdicate are taken up by tyrants. So there's a number of real nice nuggets here. So I'm going to cover some more in my commentary anyways following this. But now you get the idea. And what I very much suggest is that you listen to the whole little, it's not very long, about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And if you really like it, maybe go on and look at the Daily Wire and take a look at his discussion of Exodus, because it's pretty enlightening. It's really has some excellent insights. And then, of course, pay attention to the fact that this consortium is coming up in later on this year, and I'll have those dates at the end of this, because it's a very optimistic, very positive result. Let's see what happens, right? When he talks about, for instance, the heterosexual marriage, he does bring up the fact that, and you need to bring this up, that it's going to alienate a whole lot of people on the left. But if he does bring up the fact, for instance, he talks about Dave Rubin and homosexual marriage. They didn't adopt children, which I really appreciate. I think that's very perverse. It's kind of predatory. They have their own children with surrogate women. And as he points out, it was very complicated. This can't be the model for the masses. But he does bring in the fact that we have to have a tolerant tent, right? We have the ideals, and then we have a fringe of toleration of different variations. Will that alienate a whole lot of people on the right? I don't know. His insistence on marriage, heterosexual marriage, child-centered, will definitely alienate a lot of people on the left. Let's see how this goes. Let's see how much protest and attacks they get in London, because I imagine they're going to go after him. So anyways, all the more reason to pay close attention. Okay, I highly encourage everybody to watch that video in its entirety. I have the link below. And right now I just want to summarize what I think are the major takeaways, at least in my opinion. So the first one, I love this term, ordered freedom. Now, you may have heard from some of my videos in the past that I studied in Spain, and I came across some really interesting phenomena there. And one of them was what they called controlled chaos. And the other one was sublime savagery. There's a definite parallel here. It's a rather perhaps universal term. I don't think it's unique to Western civilization, unique to Spain. However, their manifestation of it in ritual is pretty interesting. But I digress. So Jordan Peterson's ordered freedom, oriented towards the highest possible good. Now, this is really also in keeping with why I am doing my series on the Great Awakenings. What is the ecstatic experience? Why is it in the human body, and what does it give humanity? So again, this is not the place for that. But when I hear the term oriented towards the highest possible good, the ecstatic experience is the biological manifestation of how it is that humans try to ascertain what is the highest possible good for them as individuals, for society, and for humanity at large. Again, I'll be definitely touching a lot more on that at another time. Okay, next is top-down tyranny with fractionated individuals. I didn't think fractionated was a word, but it is. I like the way he uses that because it fits beautifully, and it's something that I've been talking about a lot. And that is two things. First of all, the top-down tyranny. I've made this point many, many times, and many other people have done so as well, that socialism provides for the most concentrated power in the fewest possible hands. The greatest concentration of wealth and power in the fewest possible hands ever conceived of or ever created, ever even attempted in any social order of humanity up until the 20th century. Again, no pharaoh, no king, no emperor ever had the power of a Stalin, a Mao, a Fidel, a Pol Pot, an Adolf. Never. It's the greatest concentration of power and wealth into the fewest possible hands. That's socialism. The exact opposite of what, of course, its proponents tell you, the people, who they're now calling stakeholders. It's the opposite of what they tell you. But again, I digress. Fractionated individuals. This is the kind of perverse individuality that they are proposing. That they're not proposing it, they're actually promoting and creating it. Because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people that are weaker and weaker and weaker as they get fractionated into smaller and smaller and smaller compartments. They're slicing and dicing the social order into such tiny atomized components that people have no sense of a future, a past, and barely of a present. That's why it's no wonder, it should be no surprise that when we go to any places dominated by the liberals, the fascists, you see people wandering in the streets like zombies. No future, no destiny, no past, and even the present is just a haze. Fractionated individuals, the TikTok world. This is what they're creating. The fake claim that it is only power that rules. Now, this is something that I saw when I was studying Marxism and watching it in action. In the universities, you'll find that intellectually, they reduce everything to an utterly brutish level. Humanity is brutal enough, but when the only attributes that you analyze and that you discuss is power relations, social power relations, you're reducing humanity to such a brutish level that it's barely recognizable as what we would call, in the more ample, expansive term, humanity, as in the Renaissance, as in the classical Greeks and Romans, as in Christianity in its best forms. Humanity as a glorious manifestation, as something to study deeply in all the different nuances of what it means to be a human being. But the Marxists don't do that. They reduce everything to a brutish power struggle. And it's all to get you involved in thinking only in terms of power so that you don't understand humanity at all. And of course, the ultimate brutish power is the socialist state that's going to enforce what they call equity, which can only be done by a concentration of force that actually in its, for it to ever manifest, it would implode way before that would ever happen. You can never enforce equity. You can see that progression happening in every single socialist state. As you atomize the humans, as you categorize them into more and more minute categorizations, and you have the power to then shuffle them and put them and dice them, and here, so many blacks, so many browns, so many Asians, so many females, so many trans, so many this, so many that, get them all in the right order, in the right proportion. This is insane. There's no power structure that could ever do that without consuming itself, because nobody would be producing anything. And that's what we talked about in the last video, right? The parasites versus the producers. Eventually, the parasites outnumber the producers in a socialist state. I like his term voluntary play, because that's going to work into a lot of what I've been looking into in terms of festival culture, and all the way back to Tocqueville and the fact that Americans volunteer for everything. Voluntary play versus power narratives. That's how we combat the power narrative. And I call it, to a large degree in the work that I've been doing, creativity. Creativity is actually what, this may sound a little bit odd, but it actually is what leads to social differentiation. I don't want to say class because the class will have this connotation, but yes, I do mean class, categorizations. People create. The more they create, the more social differentiation. And that social differentiation leads to a division of labor, which does not have to be unjust, but it does lead to a differentiation of labor as people find their way, find their place in the creative process. Not everybody creates the same or equally or are interested even in the same things. But when you see an open-ended creativity, such as in some of the festivals I've looked at, you'll see how this explosion happens of people just volunteering and just doing things, and things come into being, many of them silly, many of them kind of trifling, and other things truly wonderful. And I really like what he's saying. Combat that power narrative of those maniacs at Davos. with voluntary play, creativity. Now, you've probably heard the saying that everybody has a philosophy, whether they articulate it or not. And Jordan Peterson, I think, comes up with an even better approach to that subject. He says, you're guided by a spirit. And he goes on to give some examples, some, comical, such as the one about, maybe you're guided by Priapus, the god of enormous erections. But then he really lands at home here with, the highest spirit is the spirit that rejects tyranny and calls the enslaved to freedom. And he's using, as you heard, or you will hear if you listen to the video, the story of Exodus. So it's a brilliant line. The highest spirit is the spirit that rejects tyranny and calls the enslaved to freedom. And of course, this line which follows, the habits of slaves, they don't know how to govern themselves. Wow, you can stop and think about that, can't you? This is a great line. No one lost is free. And you saw how we weave that into the discussion. You're not free when you're wandering around. You don't even know what sex you are. When you don't know where you are in society, and you're doing nothing but bitching and complaining and feeling oppressed or thinking that there's oppression when there isn't any. You're just lost. You're wandering in a social desert. And that's what he's talking about. You're wandering in a social desert. You're lost. Oh, and this is another jewel. All the responsibilities that you abdicate will be taken up by tyrants. Doesn't need any further commentary. Okay, so now as you recall, in the last video, I talked about the conference from the Freedom Cells that I thought was interesting, very interesting. I've been following them for a while, that group, and I highly recommend them. Again, I hadn't gone to one of their meetings yet, one of these conferences, but it looks interesting. This, I would say, is a must. However, it's going to be by invitation only this first time, and I can understand why. But at any rate, definitely keep track of this. The conference will be held in London, October 31st, November 1st, and 2nd, and I'll have links to that as well below. Now, I've been hinting at this as I've moved along, that Jordan Peterson is bumping up against things that I've been working at. It's overlapping, not comparing stature, believe me. But it's one more reason why I find him so compelling. And I've been working on something called the ritual spiral, not to be confused with the wonderful Victor Turner's ritual cycle, though, as I've said many times, I built on the shoulders of giants. So it's Jordan Peterson, the ritual spiral, and culture. When he talks about the highest good, that's where I'm going to be coming in with, how is it that humans ascertain what is their highest good? And what is so important about finding our highest good? I'm going to argue that it's intimately related to how culture comes into being. And what is culture? Continuity. By ascertaining our highest good, we begin to develop a destiny and an optimistic compulsion to follow it. This is what generates culture. And with that generates continuity, exactly what the fractionalized individual doesn't have. The individual with a sense of destiny has way more individuality, way more self-assurance, and way more sense of community as well. But he also has a very centered sense of himself as a human being, as a conscious entity. And this is where the varieties of the ecstatic experience, which is the term that I use, as opposed to William James, the varieties of religious experience. With religion is already a step afterwards. So I'm going below that, the varieties of the ecstatic experience. And I'm going to argue how important that fits into with what Jordan Peterson is promoting. Now, following that, I'm going to add the concept of techno-anarchism, which is more of a social order and more of a political, social, not so much cultural, though it will overlap with that, but it is political, social, militant even. How do you defend yourself against tyranny once the tyranny is already there? Creativity, obviously, that's the answer. But once tyranny is upon you, or threatening you a total political answer of resistance, how to resist tyranny when it's approaching you. And that's what I'm hoping to explore with TechnoAnarchist, my concept of the TechnoAnarchist bolt. And I think it's good here to at least celebrate the fact that we have emergent leaders that can really affect society. Now, Elon Musk, I don't care that some people don't like him, or you don't have to like everything about him. What difference does that make? He's a revolutionary. I think he's one of us, or I think so, completely. Whatever faults you think he has, he's one of us. He is in the resistance. He's already earned the ire of the World Economic Forum, and that right away puts him in my corner as far as I'm concerned. And not only that, he knows where the enemy is. He knows it's there, and he's already gone after him. And this is the richest man in the world, and he's one of the most creative people in the world, unlike those parasites and devils. So I'm very glad that Elon Musk has emerged in our time, because I really didn't expect that. And now we have Jordan Peterson from the intellectual side, from the academic side, but doing wonderful work. Let's see how this consortium that he's talking about comes to fruition. Let's see how it works. And of course, let's not forget that on the political arena, Donald Trump has a hell of a lot to do with a lot of this. Again, all the detractors of him, I could care less. I was not for him in the very beginning. I thought there were better choices, and yet the more he came to the forefront, and once he became president, the people he put around him, some of them were horrible, but the fact that he put Bannon, that totally shocked me. I said, wow, maybe he really does know what's going on around him, and he obviously does. A little naive, I thought, about his own party, about the Republicans. I don't think he realized just how rotten the Republican Party was. Nonetheless, he blew the doors open, and he got everybody angry. I mean, they've aimed every single cannon at him, and he's still here, hopefully. Let's see what happens. And I think DeSantis rising is a really good sign. Two major formidable political persons in the American political scene that, again, we should be thankful that they're there, and we need to do our part. Now, let's look at the world stage as well. Possibly before Trump, it was really Nigel Farage. He's the one that led the Brexit. If you've ever heard him speak, he's excellent. I like that guy a lot. Too bad he's not really at the forefront of British politics. I don't think he should have gotten out. He had too much faith in Boris, and that's been totally misplaced. A little bit of naivety, maybe the same way Trump did. But let's see what happens. Viktor Orban, this fellow right here. Excellent. Excellent. Sure, he's got detractors. All of them do. They have to. All the propaganda against them. Excellent. And Giorgia Meloni. She's. If you've never heard her speak, you should listen to her. She's a firebrand. She's excellent. So, and they're just three. There's many more. There's Bolsonaro in Brazil. There's, of course, before Georgia, there was Matteo Salvini. There's the party in Spain that is very inspiring. In the Netherlands, there are excellent leaders popping up all over Europe. And so the fight is on, but it looks like we're making real headway, and I'm pretty optimistic, frankly. Okay, so what's next? What do we need to see emerge? We need right-wing venture capitalist groups and businesses, but on the same kind of massive scale as a BlackRock. Now, we do have the richest man in the world on our side, but that's not enough. He doesn't control major portions of the capital in this world. The banks are not with him. Most of corporate America is not with him. He's a complete maverick. So what are we going to see emerging in this sector? Well, I'm hoping at some point for my little fledgling company to at least, that'll be my part in that arena. But I think we all need to start looking at businesses, venture capitalists that we can identify, and start making connections in the business world to create a front against the parasites that are represented by the World Economic Forum, and of course, the vultures at BlackRock. So hashtag Viva TechnoAnarchism, hashtag defund the universities, and hashtag find your own destiny.